Hi, I'm Mike Greiner, and I am a lifelong Democratic activist. Like you, I am concerned about the direction this country is going in. And as a result, that's why I decided to start this YouTube channel. If you are similarly concerned about the direction of this country, then maybe you will be able to subscribe and like this video and help us build a little community here where we can advocate a liberal, progressive agenda for the United States and maybe even influence a few people's opinions out there. Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by talking about the issue of abortion. And abortion is obviously a very divisive issue and always has been. And the irony, actually, I think, is that there are a lot of people out there who are true people of faith. And I'm distinguishing between people who are true people of faith versus people who are pretend people of faith, because obviously there is a distinction out there of those two different kinds of people. But among true people of faith, there is definitely a group who are opposed to abortion, and that issue has been used very effectively by the right as a wedge to drive these people who otherwise would generally be supportive of most of the Democratic agenda, who otherwise are opposed to things like inequality, who support education, who support childcare, who support many of the anti-poverty programs that liberals and progressives like us support, but who have been driven to the Republican Party by the abortion issue. Suddenly, abortion has become a really big issue, even more so than it has been in the past. Because up until now, really since the early 1970s, the issue has been decided by the Supreme Court since the Roe v. Wade decision in, I believe, 1973. So that decision basically stopped any further changes in abortion policy in the United States. Really, that's when the Supreme Court stepped in and made it clear that there was going to be a fundamental right to an abortion that was going to be enforced by the courts. Well, that might well be changing now. Reason being, of course, that Trump got to appoint 3 new Supreme Court justices. Part of the reason he got to appoint so many was because of the fact that Mitch McConnell had stopped President Obama from appointing Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. Garland, who's now, of course, the Attorney General, and who likely would have been a great justice, who was well respected by just about anybody on both sides of the aisle, and who probably would have been in favor of at least a moderately pro-choice position, was blocked from even getting a hearing for nearly a year before the election. That is how essentially the Republicans, with the leadership of Mitch McConnell, were able to steal that seat, and that's the seat then that currently Gorsuch is sitting in. And then, of course, they convinced Anthony Kennedy to retire, and he was a vote on the pro-choice side, even though he was a Republican appointee. He was replaced with Brett Kavanaugh, who has shown already that he is not just a pro-life vote, a recent decision of FDA versus American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, but he also has shown that he's willing to overturn precedent, that he's not going to be bound by the laws and decisions of the courts in the past. So he's really turning into a very activist judge who is willing to change law to suit his ideological position. And as a result, Elena Kagan, in some of her opinions and some of her dissents, has really been very critical of him and has come very close to basically calling him a political hack. That's not good. And then, of course, last but not least, we have the replacement for Justice Ginsburg when she passed at the very end of Trump's term. And we had, of course, the Republicans who thought that, we should not appoint anybody to the Supreme Court when there's an election pending. They were more than willing to do so when they had the opportunity to appoint a justice, and they did so, and they appointed Amy Coney Barrett. And Amy Coney Barrett has a long history of anti-abortion advocacy. She has actually stated on the record that she thinks that more intense restrictions on the right to abortion are appropriate. So I think that it's fair to say that these three votes are hardcore anti-abortion votes, hardcore anti-choice votes, and as a result of that, they are going to be in favor of overturning the precedent that really dates back to the early 1970s with Roe v. Wade. Now, that problem is especially relevant right now because of the fact that state legislatures took Trump at his word when he said that he was going to appoint pro-life justices. And as a result of that, they have passed a raft of new legislation which would immediately impose severe restrictions on the right to an abortion in many states. These laws, in many cases, have what are called trigger provisions, which mean that if the Supreme Court makes Roe v. Wade precedent no longer applicable, then these laws immediately come into effect. So as a result of that, not only would the anti-abortion forces have to wait then to pass a new law through the legislature once the Supreme Court changes the policy of the courts, but as a result of that, literally, they have laws that will go in effect the second the Supreme Court makes its ruling. And these laws have been passed in, I believe, 20 different states, mostly in the Midwest and in the South. One of those states, by the way, is my home state of Michigan, where I'm sitting right now, and where, frankly, abortion has been pretty freely available for the lifetime of most women of childbearing age at this point. Really, for 50 years, abortion has been widely available in Michigan. And as a result of that, because this trigger law is in effect, if the Supreme Court changes the Roe v. Wade precedent, then immediately abortion would go from being readily available to being completely unavailable in Michigan. And so literally women in Michigan, where I live, as it is the case in many other states, including Texas, including Georgia, including Ohio, including Louisiana, would suddenly go from having relatively ready access to abortion to having no access to abortion. And that's going to be a shock to the system, I think. And that is really what I wanted to talk about today. Because we as humans have something that psychologists and economists have identified as cognitive biases or cognitive heuristics. And basically what these are is that these are shortcuts that we use to try to process information. There's just so much information out there coming at us constantly that we've had to develop this way of making snap judgments about things so that we aren't paralyzed by analyzing the different options that we have, that we're able to look at something and make a decision as to whether this is something good for us or bad for us. Now, those biases have a bad reputation, should well, because a lot of the time they get used to do things like discriminate against people with different color skin or different characteristics or different ethnic backgrounds, or for that matter, women as opposed to men. But there are other cognitive biases, and one of them is what's called the certainty effect. And what the certainty effect is that we take things much more seriously that we can actually see or experience as opposed to things that are just theoretical problems. And abortion in the United States has really been a great example of that for most women. Most women, as I say, have grown up in an era where abortion is freely available across the United States, and they can count on the fact that courts will protect it. There is no cost, basically, and has been no cost for the last 50 years of electing anti-abortion advocates to office. So many women who might perhaps have a more conservative view on some issues, like say on fiscal matters, for example, but who consider themselves pro-choice on abortion, might vote for conservative politicians occasionally, knowing that the courts would stand in the way of abortion being taken away from them. Well, if the court steps in and makes this change that I think it's fair to say is likely to happen, then suddenly it will no longer be theoretical. It will no longer be something that, oh, we can vote for a Republican and it's not going to impact the right to an abortion. In this case, it's going to mean that suddenly people are no longer going to have access to it. And it's going to mean that women and their daughters are not going to have access to a procedure that in many cases is something that's comes up as an emergency to them. And it's going to be something that's really going to be a very scary proposition for many women across the country. And I think what it's going to do is it's going to really wake up people across the country, that there's going to be this understanding all of a sudden that you can't vote for Republicans who take anti-abortion positions and believe that abortion is going to still be protected. That suddenly there's going to be a real cost to this. And it's going to suddenly shift the certainty effect that we have from being one of, oh, we have access to abortion, to realizing, oh my gosh, all of a sudden the right to abortion is no longer available. Most women who are alive today cannot remember the bad old days when abortion was illegal and women routinely died from back alley abortions because they were so desperate to get an abortion that they would engage in an unsafe procedure with someone who's untrained, oftentimes in unsafe conditions. And as a result of that, women would routinely die from this. That was how things were before Roe v. Wade in many states. And unfortunately, my guess is that's how things are going to return to in the relative near future here in the United States, in most states. And as a result of that, that's going to be a real wake-up call. And I think what we're going to see is in a number of states that have really had relatively narrow majorities of Republicans in charge. States such as Texas or Georgia, or for that matter, states that really are becoming swing states, like, for that matter, Georgia. There's also New Mexico, Nevada, which have been in play. There is also Michigan and Ohio, North Carolina. All these states are states that are going to see major changes in the access to abortion come to pass as a result of a change in the Supreme Court policy. And suddenly, people are going to see this this reality that's going to be very different from the reality that really we've all come to expect over the last 50 years. What is that going to mean? Well, in many of these states, the margins between the Democrats and Republicans are very, very narrow. The shift of just a couple percentage points one way or the other could make the difference. And I expect that you're going to see suddenly the anti-abortion position is going to become one that is very costly to Republicans, where up until now it's been a very effective wedge issue that they've been able to use to drive, as I say, the true people of faith, who otherwise might be Democrats, over to the Republican side. I think what you're going to see at the same time are a lot of women who up until now might have voted conservative on some issues, suddenly realizing that the right to abortion is no longer something that can be taken for granted. And as that happens, I think we're going to see a shift of several percentage points over to the Democrats, and it's probably going to be something that's going to become a big problem to the Republicans going forward. So, if you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, I'd love to have you subscribe. I'd love to have you like this video if you enjoyed it. And let's start a discussion going on some of these issues. I'll try to post a new video every week. So maybe if you could also hit the notification bell, then you'll be made aware when that happens. I look forward to this discussion with you. Thanks for taking the time watching.